Hey guys, welcome back to the CNC Auto channel. Your friendly neighborhood mechanic here. And today in the shop, we're going to show you how to change the CV drive axles on the front wheel drive Toyota car. Doesn't matter if it's a Camry, Corolla, Sienna, Prius, whatever. Super simple, very similar across all those models. And today I'm going to roll in here a 2019 Toyota Camry and I'm going to show you how easy it can be. So let's get into it. The reason why we need to replace this front CV axle shaft on this 2019 Camry is because the owner, when they tried to take the hub apart, stripped out the threads. You can hopefully see that the threads on this axle shaft got boogered up. And so the only way to fix that is to replace the axle itself. And so we're going to go ahead and do that. And I wanted to walk you guys through how easy that process can be with the right tools. So obviously, first step, remove your wheel. Next, you're going to want to remove this belly pan here, and it's held on by, come under here and take a look. Up to in the front, we got 4 10mm bolts that hold the front of it. And then along the perimeter, you'll find these little push tabs like this, and you just pull the center part out, and then the whole thing can come down. I'll go ahead and remove this other push tab right here. I've only got a couple of them left in here. And then this is going to be able to fall down. I've already loosened these 10mm bolts, so we'll go ahead and take it out. And you can see how much access this gives once it's out of the way to really get a chance. Come look right up in here. You can see now where this axle shaft goes and stabs into the transmission right here. And so that's where we're going to pop it out of the transmission, but we've got to take it out of the back of the wheel spindle and hub assembly here. In order to do that, we'll go ahead and do a step-by-step taking this apart, and I'll show you that process. So the first thing we want to take off is this caliper bracket with the caliper. We're going to go ahead and leave that caliper as part of the bracket, pull it all off as one assembly, and hang it up out of the way. In order to get this caliper bracket off, you're going to have to get to the back of it, and there's a couple of bolts back here. Let me point to that. Now, before I go back here, let me show you something, guys. If you need better access to the back of the caliper, just grab your wheel and turn it, and it'll turn by hand usually. And now you can get back in here a little bit easier. So come back here and take a look. And we're going to remove this caliper bracket, which is held on by these two bolts here. They're 17mm. So let's go ahead and do that. There's one. And then it's a good idea to support it so it doesn't fall. There's two. Okay. Now this caliper with pads and all should just slide up and out of the way. You want to keep this rotor from falling off. You just take your hanger, put it through one of the bolt holes, and hang it up somewhere sturdy. I'm choosing to hang it off of a spring up here. Come see where I hang things off right here, off the spring with a nice little S-shaped hook. You can get these S-shaped hooks online, or you can just, this is just a piece of wire bent to the right shape. Now, since this rotor is kind of flopping around, I'm gonna go ahead and just pull it straight off so it's out of our way and doesn't have any danger of falling on us. So the next step, again, in removing this axle shaft is we have to disconnect this whole assembly from the bottom of the strut with these two nuts and bolts. And then it'll allow us to take this whole this whole spindle and swing it forward and push that axle shaft back through it. Let me go ahead and turn this back straight on. Now, the owner tried to take this apart, and they've misplaced the nut, but normally there's a nut here. This is a passenger side, and unlike the driver's side, this one still has its factory nut holding the axle shaft inside the hub. And it is a 30 millimeter 12-point socket. So see, it's got 12 points inside instead of the normal 6 flat spots. And that 12-point socket will fit right over that. You want to use a real heavy-duty impact wrench, and you're going to spin this off. Now look right here. Let me point with something. Oh, we found a nice little stick. Okay, so notice this nut is crimped right there. You see how it's bent in a little bit? So whenever this nut is put on, they hit this with a chisel or a punch right there and give it a divot so that it cannot back off on its own. And so you can take a sharp point and go in here and take that divot out by sliding it in that little gap right down here, and it'll pop that divot out a little bit, and then it'll turn easier. But if you've got a really heavy duty impact, you just put that socket on here and hit go, and it'll spin it off even with that divot in place. Take your impact and spin that nut off. That way you're freeing that axle. See, as I push this, look back here and you'll see as I push on the front of this, see that axle back here moving back and forth? Okay, that tells you that this is free in the hub and it will easily push out the back. Okay, in order to get the axle shaft out, we have to take this whole spindle and hub assembly off of this lower strut mount. It's held on by these 2 bolts that come through here, and the upper one has an 18 millimeter head and uses a 21 millimeter nut. Make sure that your caliper is out of the way. Can you see this real good? We're going to go ahead and take that off. Take the nut side loose. 21 millimeter nut, 18 millimeter head. Help if I go in the right direction. There we go. Okay, that's part. Now this bolt will come out of here, and it's a cam bolt. See, it's a weird shaped cam bolt. That is designed that way so that they can adjust the alignment of the car. And so you're going to have to get this car aligned whenever you do this. That's something you probably can't do at home yourself. And also it's got this this washer on this side with this little tang. Come around on this side and take a look at how that goes in. See that? This side has a hole, and this little tang has to line up with that notch, just like so. So make sure that that's all lined up when you go to putting this thing back together. And just on this one, notice that the little kick out right there is down at about the 6 o'clock position, and that notch is up at the 12 o'clock position. The lower of the 2 bolts holding the spindle to your shock is going to be a 22 millimeter nut and a 22 millimeter head on the bolt. So you want to hold that back side with the bolt and loosen the nut, just like that. Now, if these bolts don't come out real easy, you can take a hammer and tap that bolt through if you need to. And a lot of times before you tap that bolt through, if it's really hard, make sure that you put the nut back on that bolt to where it's flush and you've got a nice strong surface that you can hammer to push that bolt through with. Okay, so now this spindle is loose from our strut. Let's make sure that we don't catch this ABS cord in the mix. Looks like we might need to undo that. So come over here and I'll show you what we're doing. So let me get that free, get you a little trim pull tool here, stick that underneath where that holds onto the strut. And it's just held in with one of those push pin kind of things. Now, that's free, hopefully out of the way a little bit. And if that didn't give you enough room, you can also free up this wire down here. Turn this a little bit. Come look right down here. I'll try to point to it. You can also unbolt the ABS from right down here, and then it will be free. It's pretty tight, so let's go ahead and remove this from down here. That's usually a 10mm bolt. Just undo that bolt, and you can give it a little wiggle, and it should pop right out. There we go. Now it's safe and out of the way. You want to make sure you put your bolt back in place so that you don't lose it. Okay, now watch this. So we're going to just pull this axle now out of the back. Make sure I get that darn ABS wire tucked up somewhere safe, out of the way so it doesn't get pinched or broken. Now that this is all free, you can push on the axle snout through the center of the hub here, or pull it from the back while you tilt this all forward. There we go. So now our axle is out of the spindle and hub assembly. Hey guys, if you're finding this helpful in any way, please do us a favor and hit that like and that subscribe button right now. It really helps us to reach a greater audience, and so that more people will get to see our videos. Appreciate you guys. So now that we've got the front of the axle shaft out of the hub, we need to pop the back of the axle shaft out of the transmission. So come look up under here where it stabs into the transmission right here. You see that silver flange? You want to find some sort of a pry bar, big screwdriver or something like that, and you want to put it, can you see what I'm doing here? You want to put it behind that silver flange right there and pry that axle out. Now, I'm going to put a little catch basin under here, because sometimes when you do this, a little bit of transmission fluid will come out. Let me see if I can do that. I'm holding the front side of this axle while I pop the back out. Just give it a couple of little quick pushes. From behind there. That thing should pop right out. Just like that. So it gave loose there. I knocked over my catch basin, so it popped it loose. Now I just pull it straight out of the transmission. And that right there was what was holding it in, is this little C-clip. So when you're popping this out, you got your little pry bar back behind this little flange, and it has to get past that little clip. But there it is. So there's the old one. And let's lay it out here and compare it to our new one. Make sure that we got the right part. Looks about the same length. Spindles, the splines look the same. This end here looks the same. So it looks like the right part. So we're ready to go back in with our new CV axle. And so you can look down here and see where we need to go. Go ahead and stab this thing in there. Just like when we took it out, you're going to want to aim that end of it into that hole. Now this time you don't have to use a pry bar or anything. You can just push it home until it clips in place. So just make sure that everything's in a straight line here. When you do this, you'll feel the splines kind of line up a little bit, and then you want to give it a quick jolt or two like that, and you'll feel it go in all the way. and come over on this side and take a look, and you'll see back here that flange is flush up against the transmission again. So that's how you know that you're in all the way. Okay, now come over to this end, and we're going to put this end back inside of our wheel hub. So we take the nut that comes with it off, and since this spindle and wheel hub is all free already, come look on the back side of this thing as I try to stab this in. So look back here. Okay, so you just pull this forward. You want to look right in here, and you want to line up that new one into that hole and slowly stand it up and rotate just a little bit by hand. You'll feel the splines will line up, and then come look right here. Once those splines line up, it will come all the way through just like the old one was. See how that comes all the way through like that? So now that's lined up, and you can put these bolt holes back into the position where they came from. So let me get those bolts. So here's that lower one. Now when you take apart a bolt, especially on suspension, a lot of times you'll see some crustiness on here. That's old Loctite. If you see a bolt that's got Loctite on it from the factory, you want to put Loctite back on it when you put it back together. So we're going to do that. Put a little bit of Loctite on there. You don't have to go crazy with the stuff. We're going to feed that, just line up those holes with where it came out of. You might have to lift up. You might have to push in while you lift up and just kind of wiggle it around a little bit. And if you're having trouble getting it lined up, you can stick a screwdriver or something there just to kind of help it line up a little bit. There we go. Once you get that one of them in there, the other one will line up a lot easier. If there's that lower one, spin that nut on by hand. Now let's try and get that upper one in place. Now this one's kind of tricky. Remember, it has this weird washer that's got the little tang. It's got a cam, an oblong shaped sort of lobe on it for alignment. So you want to make sure that all that goes in the right position. Just like that lower one, you may have to wiggle it back and forth a little bit to get everything to kind of line up. That went through pretty easy. Now come look over here on this back side. This is real important. Okay, you want that washer. You want that washer to have this little kick out down at 6 o'clock. That way the little tang on the back of that washer fits into that cutout that's at 12 o'clock. Now we just put our nut on this side. And it's ready to tighten up. Now this nut has been crimped or whatever so that it holds on to the threads. It's sort of an oval shape. It's designed not to back off that way. Ready to tighten these things up. I'll give you the torque specs for those here in a second, but we're going to tighten them up by hand. Also, before I forget, let's put our new washer, new nut in place on the front of the axle. We also want to make sure that we put our ABS sensor wire back in place. So snake that back around the way that it came through. Again, it's held in place with this 10mm bolt. That doesn't have to be held on there super tight. Just snug it up and it's good. Okay, let's tighten up these bolts here that hold the spindle to the strut. So come on back out here. It'll be a better vantage point, I think. Let me turn this a little bit by hand. Okay, let's go ahead and do the, we'll do the lower one. That lower one, 22mm nut and a 22mm bolt head. Come down through here and hold that bolt head. And now we'll put that on this side and tighten it down. I'm not going to tighten it to full tightness because we need to get the torque spec for this. Now the upper one, that's where we use the 21mm socket and an 18mm wrench. So the 18mm holds the head of the bolt. The 21mm socket turns the nut. Just get it tight. We'll do the torque with the torque wrench. Now we want to tighten up the nut that goes onto this axle. And the original one was a 30mm 12-point socket. This aftermarket one takes a 32mm and it's 6-point. So we'll go ahead and use that. And again, we're just gonna suck it down and get it tight, but we're not gonna use this to bring it to torque spec. We're gonna figure out what the torque spec is. We're gonna put the vehicle on the ground, that way the wheel can't turn on us, and we'll crank that thing to where it's supposed to be. All right, now we're ready to put our rotor and our caliper back in place. I'll go ahead and twist this thing so it's easier to see. Get our caliper down from where we had it hung up out of the way. Remember, we left this caliper loaded. Look right in here. See, we left the pads in here, and so we're going to just try and slip it back in place over this rotor without having to take those pads out. Just save ourselves a little bit of time. Load it up, it'll slide back into place just the same as it came off. There we go, like that. Now, we need to line up the caliper bolt holes in the back. Now those caliper bolts need Loctite also, guys. So don't forget that, a little bit of Loctite on those caliper bolts so that they don't come apart. There we go. And let's see if we can't see. Let me get my light back over here so that you can see too. There we go. All right, so we want to line up this bolt hole, and you'll feel when it's lined up because that bolt will want to go inside of its home. You can also look at where that hole is. It's right there. That rotor wants to move around on me quite a bit. If you're annoyed by that rotor moving a little bit, let me go ahead and show you. Come over here. Like it's doing on me right now. That's kind of annoying. And if it bothers you, you can take one of the lug nuts and just spin it down till it's tight up against that rotor. And now that rotor won't flop around on you. Makes it a little easier to line up the bolt holes. So let's go back over here and get this upper one. Okay. Going right through here. There, I felt it grab. Want to make sure you start all these bolts by hand. You don't want to cross thread anything, create more trouble for yourself later. Okay, good. These are started by hand. Again, those are 17mm, and that's what we're going to use to tighten it up. I'll give you the torque specs here in a minute, but for tightening it up just tight, we're just going to use our impact here. Just like that. I've got a little bit of a wobble extension on here. That just makes it real easy to kind of get on those things. Last step in this process is after you torque this nut that holds the axle to your hub, you want to pin it right here. So get yourself a punch or something. You can use a chisel. I'm going to use a punch in this case. And you want to set it right there on that little piece of thin metal. And you want to take a hammer and just give it a little divot. See how it bends that thing down? What that does is it makes it so that this nut cannot back up on its own. It's basically locking it in place. That's it. So now we have replaced the axle on this side. You can put the wheel back in and give it a test drive. Well, there you go. See, I told you this was going to be easy. Changing out that CV axle on this Toyota Camry, no big deal. Same thing on a Prius, the Corolla, the Sienna minivan, a lot of different cars. really easy, quick and easy process. You can do this yourself. You don't have to have the fancy lift. You don't have to have any real special tools for this. Just a really powerful impact wrench will make it a lot easier. So I definitely recommend that. But just go back through, pay attention to the steps of this process, and you can do this on just about any car. Appreciate you guys tuning in. Please hit that like and subscribe, and I look forward to seeing you back here again soon. Thank you and God bless.